far today. Welcome to our next, this is I think the fourth out of five VSGI speaker series that we're holding this semester. So for the spring series. Today we have a great guest speaker lined up for you, Gregory Grimsby. You may know him, you may not. I'll let him give a little bit of his background, where he's coming from, and I'm sure he's got a great presentation for you guys today. He's an excellent talker. He's been making board games for quite a while, and I've had the pleasure of playing a few of them. So the idea behind this is Greg is going to do a little bit of a talk, do different things, and then what's a Greg? Nice. And then we're going to open it up for questions near the end, and he'll try to answer questions as best as he can, and we'll go from there. And then Greg, I'll be around if you want to have me help you like call out questions, make sure we didn't miss anything, things like that. So without further ado though, I will turn it over to you so you can introduce yourself, set up your presentation, all that wonderful stuff. Everybody, welcome Greg.
Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. I just ran up the stairs and grabbed my headset, so I'm out of breath. I'm excited to talk to you about board games. We are recording. Awesome. I have a presentation that's going to walk us through the process of how I've been developing my own board games. And for you folks who are students at George Mason, a lot of this material, it's going to be very analogous to what you're doing with digital game design. And I think that's awesome because that means that you're in a position to take some skills and some interest that you have in digital games and to see that come into fruition in a different medium, and that's board games. So I'm going to cue up my presentation and we'll get in here and look at some cool stuff. So let me share that up. And you good folks, let me know when this streams over to you. And I'm going to share sound. I hope that will work out all right. Okay. So hopefully you all can see.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. All right. Building our own board games. Let's get into the nitty gritty here. And as Professor Casey says, we'll have some time toward the end to do some questions and answers. So yeah, questions are wanted. All right, just a little bit about myself. There's a chance that some of you folks don't know me at all, especially with COVID. You probably haven't even seen me. So just some of my background. I've been here at Mason for 10 years. Man, time flies. My background is similar to James from digital game design. I worked at Mythic, which became EA, BioWare, and all this stuff. But my background is in the visual arts, 3D modeling, animation, concept art, and all that stuff. My game company is called Ogre Crossing Games, and I formally formed it as an LLC last year. And this is my publishing platform. It's my brand, and we'll talk about that just a little bit in this presentation, especially in the context of self-publishing. You have this idea, you want to make your game, you want to get it out there. You have a decision to make about, are you going to publish it yourself? Or are you going to pitch your game to a publisher and have them publish it? Choices to be made, but this is my game company where I'm going to be publishing my products. A little context.
Greg, you muted yourself.
That's weird.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe a keyboard shortcut. I don't know. I'm going to show you a teaser video for my current project, which is going to go to Kickstarter in June. And I think this will give you a sense of my kinds of designs and perhaps some of the large amount of work that's ahead of you if you do wish to go this route. It's a lot of work. So this is a quick video, and I believe I have sound turned on, so let me know if you don't get that sound. Sound good? Deep in space, alien pet shops compete to be the best. Gather cute and mildly dangerous pets from over 50 species with different traits and different special abilities. Manage your team of cubicle workers as they care for your pets and mitigate disasters waiting to happen. Whoops! Sorry, Bob. Compete to win awards for the most dangerous pets, the cutest pets, the most cuddly pets, and, well, for whatever that is. Your workers can mutate your pets into the ultimate designer pets.
What?
What time you are
What time? 今やってる。
By a variety of pet shops, from the altruistic alien aid who saves abandoned pets to you know who sends his son to gather tribute from other shops. Can you earn enough profit and manage the chaos to win? Alien Pet Shop? All right, that gives you a little bit of a sense of something that I've been working on. And we'll break down a lot of that process, the design itself, all of the marketing, well, some of the marketing. So that's some context for you. Let's see if I can get this bar over here where you're not seeing it. All right. Oh, all right, did that. So an invocation, and not this kind of invocation, but for you D&D players. Yeah. My invocation is that you can make board games, especially you folks who are game design students. This is something that is available to you as a creative and expressive medium. And in this presentation, we'll talk about a couple of topics, though, as I invoke you to, and I challenge you to pursue making games. There's going to be a lot of research that you're going to have to do, and it is a lot of work, but you all should know that from your experiences. But I challenge you to consider exploring this space. Why make board games? Well, yeah, it's a creative outlet. Right now I spend more time working on my board games than I do on my digital work. And there are a couple reasons for that. One, I want to finish my projects, so that's by necessity forcing me to spend time on them. It allows me to use so many different skill sets. I get to use my design brain. I get to use my art brain. I get to learn things about business, about marketing. So the part of me that wants to keep learning and growing as a person, like that's being challenged. So it's a wonderful creative outlet, and it is a challenge. Another great thing about board games is that you can make a game by yourself, or you can work on a really small team, and that means control. Like you have creative control. You all have worked on small teams before, presumably, and you understand that the smaller the team is, the more impact a single individual on that team has. There's that responsibility, but there also is that ability to influence the result of what you've been working on. And because board games are smaller in scope than digital games, generally speaking, small teams, more control, and also hopefully you love board games. If you're here, maybe that's true for you. But if you do love board games, say, hey, why don't you try to make one? All right. Other aspects of board games right now. It is a golden age of board games. They are going through just this explosion in popularity. And I got some numbers to throw at you here. $3 to $4 billion, depending upon where you get this information. That's the size of the board game market just in the US last year, even with COVID. And there's an estimate you can see there, $30 billion worldwide by 2026 is the estimate. And that's a lot of money. And that means there are a lot of people who have embraced board games as a hobby. Just like you all have probably embraced video games as a hobby, right? Board games have become more accessible. They have become more diverse in their topics and their audiences and who are playing board games. During COVID, we had a lot of people who were buying board games for their family because they couldn't go anywhere. So they're buying family games, they're buying educational games. And why this growth? I feel that there are a lot of people who are responding to digital in a negative way. And they actually want to disconnect from digital for a while. And they want to sit down, talk to someone and smile and fellowship with them and play something together. As much as we love online games, it's a different experience than sitting down and having that eye contact and sharing a drink and chips and stuff. You know, if you play D&D, you get a lot of this. And this has fed this growth in the market. Kickstarter has also caused a lot of this growth to happen because it has facilitated small developers to be able to find an audience, get funding, and publish their game. So it's been fuel for this growth. And I mentioned diversity, which is kind of a fulfilling cycle in that as the market gets bigger, we make a broader amount of games, more diverse kinds of games. And then the market gets bigger. And so we make more and more games, and that just feeds upon itself. And what's great is you can make a very niche game. You can make a game about alien pet shops. And I don't need 1 million players. I just need a couple hundred backers who go, that looks fun. My kids are going to like that, or I like that style of game, or that's pretty cute. I just need a niche that big. And if I can connect to that niche and get them to back, I publish my game. It's a huge $1 billion market, lots of audiences, lots of interests, and that's awesome. And that's not so different from digital game production, although it's bigger, and I think it's a lot more difficult to even find an audience and connect to them. All right, let's head on here. Some definitions, and these are terms that I want to kind of lay out that I'm going to be using throughout this talk. So let's just kind of get some of this out of the way so that we're using the same words. Mechanisms, components, and dynamics. Get a little animatic playing here. So mechanisms, those are the rules, the collection of individual little rules that make up your game. A mechanism might be card management. So in the animatic there, you have some cards, you get to pick from those cards, and you're going to play some card, right? So that's a mechanism, card management. Dice chucking. Well, dice is a component, but we can use dice in a lot of different ways in different mechanisms to provide different kinds of gameplay. Dice are random, so they are randomizers. We can customize dice. You can see some symbols on these dice, and those dice symbols mean different things. So as a designer, I have 6 sides on a D6 that I can play with. Play with odds, play with results, play with those icons, and they can mean different things. But the dice chucking and the randomness of dice is a mechanism that you could use. So lots of different ways that we use components, dice, cards, your board, to create your basic gameplay. Then we have dynamics. So dynamics are not specifically written in the rule book. These are the emergent patterns of play that happen as your players encounter the rule set and the components. An example of a dynamic might be how players who are behind might tend to gang up on the person who is ahead. It doesn't say in the rule book, when Johnny gets ahead, you all should pile on him. it doesn't say that, but that's what you do. It's based upon psychology. It's based upon how you interact with the game. So those are dynamics. And a good designer designs dynamics. Again, they're not in the rule book, but you want to understand how your players are interacting with the game and design that experience specifically. All right, so that's some terminology. And notice I said mechanisms. That's the preferred word, not mechanics, because a mechanic works on your car. A mechanism is something that functions and does a certain thing. I might still say mechanic every now and then. They're basically the same, but I have a problem with mechanics. Who is making these games? So what are the roles on your team? Well, obviously you have your designer, and these roles are analogous to what you have in digital games. Your designer is thinking of that rule set. They are designing the gameplay experience. They're asking themselves questions about what the player is supposed to do, what their choices are going to be. And at some point, they do have to think about the components that are going to be in play. Absolutely. So that role, I think, is fairly well known to you all as an audience. Then we have the artist. The artist is going to be producing things like your illustrations. So if you have cards, you might have illustrations on those cards. They might be doing things like your key art on your box. Lots of things that require artistic skill that are going to make their way into your game in various places, and you need an artist for that. And that's a distinction from graphic designer. A graphic designer, although they might have some artistic skill, some illustration skill, the ability to create a single drawing of something. The graphic designer is more concerned with layout. They're concerned with icons, icon design, visual placement of elements. They're also going to work with you when you go to pre-press and actually try to print your game on a real printing machine, how to get all those colors separated and do all that stuff. So a graphic designer works with the designer and the artist, make sure that those cards, the game board, are communicating information clearly and plainly and in a way that still reinforces the theme of the game. So those are the three very distinct roles involved in making the game. So I'm not getting into like marketing people. I'm not getting into publishing people. That's kind of a separate conversation, although we'll hint at it later on. And if I don't say it, they're transferable. Yes, so a lot of the skills that you have as digital developers, you can use them here. All right, getting started. So you're excited. You're like, yeah, I want to make a board game. Let's do this. So you got to learn the medium first. You have to have a sense and understanding of what makes a good board game, right? You have to have an understanding, at least a survey knowledge of the different kinds of mechanisms and components that are out there. So here's your short list of things that you're going to want to do. It's a short list, but it's a lot of work. Play board games. Yay, right? It goes without saying. A gamer who wants to make games, they play games. That gives them an understanding of different mechanisms and stuff. You want to play hundreds of board games. And in that, you're not just a consumer, but you need to adopt the lens of the designer / the artist / the graphic designer. And when you're sitting down and playing a game, as hard as it may be, to think about the game both as an experience, but think about it through that designer lens and you go, oh, I understand why they designed that mechanism that way. That was to provide a catch-up mechanism, or they did that to give me some extra choices at this part in the game, or they turned off or they made the beginning of the game easier for the player by not allowing us to have access to this part of the board game yet. So consume games, yes, play games, but while you're doing that, analyze them in the back of your head. Try to understand why the choices were made that were made in those games. So this is the research part that I warned you about. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of research. Luckily, you're playing board games. So, right, fun research, I think. Listen to design podcasts, and I give a link there, the gamedesignroundtable.com, and I'll have all the links listed at the end of the presentation for you. That's a great place to start. It's an audio podcast. They have hundreds of interviews with professional, world-class board game designers. And they cover all kinds of topics, from design specific, certainly, but they'll talk also about auxiliary things like the marketing and the Kickstarter and all that. They'll talk about their process. They'll talk about their philosophy. They'll talk about their games, of course. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of material there that's available. And I think that's awesome. There might be a version of this in the digital world. Some YouTube channels have this, but this is right there on that website. It's a great resource, and it's where I started 10 years ago when I was trying to deep dive and get into board game design. It's one of the resources that I used. You can watch reviews on YouTube of board games. So again, there's a link to the Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is the most popular board game review channel on YouTube. I think they have over 100,000 subscribers, which is, not a lot compared to other people on YouTube. But given the market of board games, they have a pretty big audience, and they review board games, dozens and dozens of board games every month, if not hundreds. And in those reviews, you learn about games without having to play them. So you can get a sense of the mechanisms and the components and the genres and all that. And heck, find a game that you might want to go buy just by watching those reviews. So that makes this not as arduous when I say hundreds of games. Well, you might not play 100 games, but research hundreds of games. Use YouTube to help you with that. So these are the things that you want to research. There's mechanisms, the genres, the visuals, and the production. And each of these research areas look a little different. So when you research mechanisms, yeah, you're going to be playing games. You're going to also be going to websites that actually list mechanisms for board games. I think I have a list in this presentation for that. And just understand those different mechanisms. Genres, let's see if I have a slide on that. Genres, yeah. So brief overview of some genres. This is what a genre is in board game development. Deck building is a genre of board game. So genre has less to do with like the tone or the mood or the setting. In board games, it's the type of game. So in a deck building game like Dominion, I'm sure lots of you folks have played Dominion. In a game like this, you start out with a very small selection of cards that form your deck. There is a large tableau of cards available that you can purchase. You can see the cards laid out on the table there in that picture. But your currency is really low at the beginning of the game. You don't have many cards. You don't have much money or ability to buy new cards. But you do. You slowly buy new cards, and they go into your deck, and your deck gets bigger. Eventually, you'll have drawn all the cards from the deck into your hand, like you see here, and then you recycle your deck. You shuffle it, and you draw from it again. But now you have some cards that you've bought in that deck, and hopefully you're going to get them. And so each round, you buy new cards. They go to your deck, and that's why it's called deck building, because you're buying cards, adding them to your deck, and you get this somewhat of an engine building kind of mechanism, although that's a separate genre, where your ability grows during the course of the game as your deck gets larger. That's deck building. Dominion is the original and most famous version. Dexterity games. This is a game called Ice Cool. In dexterity games, you are manipulating components with your hand-eye coordination. You're flicking, you're plucking, you're dropping, you're trying to pull things out, like Jenga is a dexterity game. So these games are about those tactile components and how you have to manipulate them to do things. They do tend to be for general audiences or younger audiences. Social deduction games. I would imagine probably a good many of you have played games like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, Secret Hitler, Coup, The Resistance, all those kinds of games. In that kind of game, you have roles, and who at the table is each role is unknown. And that's where the social deduction aspect comes from in this game. They're hidden roles. You don't know what allegiance each player at the table is. And through the course of that game session, you're trying to deduce based upon what players say, what they do or don't do. You want to figure out what their role is or what their allegiance is. And presumably that's going to build up to some kind of vote or some kind of mechanism where the game is going to be won or lost by either side. And I just put this picture in here from this YouTube channel, How to Lie to Your Friends in Social Deduction Games, because that's kind of a thing. Most of them do stress a certain ability to lie and to keep a straight face and poker face, and some people don't like this kind of game at all. But they're a lighter game. They tend to be considered party games in some ways, although a true party game is a slightly different game. But that's social deduction. So we have lots of genres of games, and you want to research those games and have an understanding of what's out there. Here are some resources for you. Board Game Geek is a great website. It's been around for at least 15 years. Close to it. We'll call it 15. I might be wrong. They have a huge database of games, of board games. I would imagine every board game that's been published in a real kind of official way, it's in there. They have thousands, if not tens of thousands of games listed, and they're categorized. And you can search it and search by mechanism. You can search by the weight of the game, which is not its heaviness. It's how easy the game is to play. We don't typically use the word weight in digital games. You don't say, oh, Dark Souls is a heavy game, right? But in board games, we use that term. We call it weight. So a light game is a game that's easy to get into. The rule set's easy to wrap your head around, versus a heavy game might have a lot of rules, a lot of depth, take longer to play. And you can use Board Game Geek to search for game weight, game genre, mechanisms, of course, keywords for the title, and you'll be able to find out more about that game. Most of the big games are going to have their own forums as well, so you can discuss there. Other resources. Stonemeyer Games makes an amazing blog. And that blog covers design topics. It covers a lot of Kickstarter topics. Hundreds and hundreds of posts that revolve around board game design. Here's a nice checklist. I'm not going to pull it up, but it's a checklist that was done by Cardboard Edison. They run a game design contest, board game design contest every year. And they take, as in it's a contest, so they'll take lots of submissions, and then they'll have a vetting process, and they'll review them, and they'll have a finalist and all that. They have created this checklist, which is a really simple checklist of things you should evaluate your game. Like, is it fun, right? But it has some more useful checklist items than just that. But that's kind of like how it's helpful. Two game books that I recommend. One's called Game Tech, and it's written by Jeff Engelstein, who's a board game designer. It really gets into the mechanisms, but also some of the math. It talks a lot about math, actually. Don't be scared. As board game designers, we do have to understand math, especially like probabilities. So you roll a dice. What's the chance of getting a certain result on that dice? If you roll 2 dice, how does that probability change? So Game Tech talks a little bit about probabilities, as it is important for us as designers to understand how that relates to luck versus skill, and of course the chance that outcomes are going to happen in your game. Art of Game Design, written by Jesse Schell, which I believe in some of our game design courses will mention this book because it's not just board games, it's games in general. I love the idea of adopting lenses to view our work. And that book lists dozens of lenses, if not over 100 of different ways of thinking about your game. It's a great resource to open it up and just kind of look at it and go, I haven't thought about my game from the marketing lens lately. So let me think about that. Or I haven't looked at my game through the lens of decision space. Let me think about decision space in my game, right? And these are kind of like prompts that help you to, in some ways, laterally think and approach what you're currently doing in your design. It's lateral in that you're not thinking about your game in the same way. So lenses can help you adopt different viewpoints into your game design. So those are other great resources for you to look at. All right, process overview. We're getting into the nuts and bolts here. Again, you're going to see some similarities with digital game design, just in terms of the flow, because as most creative projects, you start with an idea and then you refine and get resolution and clarity and finally make the thing. Yeah, so we have some similarities with digital design. Let's kind of take a look at these. Whoop. Okay, so you have your ideation / concept phase. I'm going to keep this real. I don't sit down and go, I'm going to make a board game right now, right? That's what really happens is I'm doing something else, and this might be the same for you. I'm like in the shower, or I'm driving, or I'm doing something else, or I watch a movie or read a book, and the spark of an idea comes up. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if? Right? You hear me on that one? Wouldn't it be cool if? And dagnabbit, you better go write that idea down or pull out your phone and get your notes and write some notes down. That's where, for me, most ideas actually begin. I don't sit down and go, it's time to design a game today. You can certainly do that, of course, and some of the steps here are going to help you. So you have an ideation concept phase where you're just thinking about the initial idea of what the game is going to be. Just broad, high ideas, just some feelings. Maybe there are some games that it's similar to, like, oh, I'm thinking about a game that's kind of like this plus this. And that might be all that you record. And I'm going to suggest, I don't have it anywhere else in the presentation here, but I'm going to suggest you keep a folio of your ideas, folio, which I'll define that, a reference cache on your computer of images that are cool, inspiring images, inspiring games, but also keep a folder for your game design ideas. And I have a folder and it probably has about 30 different ideas. And some of them are just crappy and they're just like a 2 or 3 sentence blurb. And that's it. That's all it's in the Word document, is maybe like a simple sentence. But I've recorded the idea and I can come back to it later. Some ideas are going to grow and they're going to get out of the ideation concept phase, and you're actually going to make those games. But I highly suggest you keep a storage on your computer, or you can use a traditional notebook or like a Moleskine journal if you want to. Record those ideas, get them down there. So we have the ideation phase, and then there's going to be a tipping point where you decide, I'm going to make this game, or I'm going to explore this game farther, where I need to start testing and prototyping. And that's when we get into the design phase. In digital games, that might be considered you're going into production, but we don't use that word production in board games. It's just called the design phase. Then we have, after your design is, let's just call it like 85% done, lots of play testing has happened, then it's time to decide publishing. What are you going to do about publishing? You have the option to publish the game yourself. You have the option to pitch the game to a publisher and have them buy the game, and then they'll do all of the other nasty stuff for you, the manufacturing, the marketing. But there'll be a point where you've decided that this game is good enough, it's getting good feedback, and you feel that there is a market for it just from what you've researched, and then you have to decide. We'll talk about this more later on. All right, let's see, 25 minutes. I better pick up my pace here, and I'm already talking pretty fast. Designing. So designing, in that design phase, you are going to have a rule set. You have designed an idea what this game is, and then you're going to play test that idea. And then from that play test, you were going to redesign, and that is the iterative design process. So early on, you can see the little picture I have here. There's a paper prototype, and this is pencil drawings of different creatures. It's a paper prototype for pet shop. Dice. It's, you know, it's meant for me. I don't show this to anyone. This is just me sitting down, trying out ideas and trying out a sequence of events and gameplay, trying out the structure of rounds and turns and actions that I'm doing. And I'm analyzing whether I feel the choices are giving me the experience I want. Are the numbers wrong? Like, is one die too imbalanced or not enough? There's just so many questions that you're going to be able to answer. And that's what playtesting is about, answering questions. Because at the beginning of design, your game is 99% questions, right? You have an idea, and then lots of questions about what that game is going to look like and how it's going to play. So playtesting is going to answer questions. And early on, you're going to answer so many questions with just a few playtests. What's fun? What works? What's a dumb idea? Should this game even continue to be developed? Those are things that you have to answer. You'll get feedback from those playtests. Even when you're just playing by yourself, you'll get feedback. You'll have a sense of what the experience was like. Again, what worked and didn't work. I'm going to suggest you record your playtests. Maybe not these paper prototype playtests, but you can at least record audio. And this is critical when you have other people playing your game. At least record the audio so you can play that audio back and listen to what they say, listen to their questions, listen to where they aren't sure about rules, listen to where it's fun. Where are they responding to your design? Record your play test. You can have your cell phone, boom, record. We'll talk about with digital play testing, you can record the digital play test. Prototypes. Let's go. I had one line item there. Yes, your prototypes can be paper prototypes until they can't. What does that mean? Well, you're going to get to a point in the design process and prototyping process where the paper prototype is just too daggone ugly. It's not clear enough, and you have concerns about like the layout of things, that you have to do a better prototype than just pencil and paper. You got to kind of get into the computer and start printing things out and getting a little more structure. That it's going to communicate better to your play testers, that clarity, it not being pencil. It also will start to let you know, like, oh, I what do you mean I can't get 10 lines of text on my card? Whoops. And so you'll learn some things about graphic design. So prototyping resources. So here's a brief list of things that you're going to need. I mean, computer, it's not on there, but a color printer. These things are all going to help you do that prototyping, and there are more things that you can get. That knife is the Alpha knife right there. It's great because it's a break-off knife. So when it gets dull, you break off the tip and it's sharp again. And so you keep breaking off those segmented pieces. So your knife is never dull. Like once it starts to get even a slightly dull, you can decide if you want to keep using it or break it off and go from there. And they cost like maybe $15, maybe 10. That's an Alpha knife, and that's an Alpha mat. So you can cut cards, you can cut stickers. So these are craft supplies that you need for your prototyping. Yeah, so at some point you're going to need to have better prototypes, and you can use a professional prototyping component service to make you some cards and dice. So here are some places I've used 2 of them, maybe 3, all 3 of them. And there's some really crappy frame grabs there from some unboxing videos I did where I got my components from these companies. And so what you do is you send off your art. They have a template. This is their card template. That template has 18 cards. I'm doing all this gesticulation. I don't even know if y'all can see because I'm going full screen with the presentation, but I'm gesticulating. Cards. You have a gang up of 18 cards, and that's on their template. And so if you adhere to their template, their machine's going to print and cut the cards properly. So you send out those templates. And I typically will do a revision of my improved prototype about every 3 to 4 months. It costs money. I mean, the cards, they're not too bad. Typically, if you had like a deck of deck of like 50 cards, that's about $15 to $20 to get that printed on real card stock. And if those cards are going to be instantly like invalidated because your rules change or whatever, then that's the decision you have to make is when are your rules stabilized enough that you can afford to spend the time to prepare the art and then spend the money to pay for the cards. If you're going to start to really up the ante in terms of who you're showing the game to, like you're pitching to a publisher, then it's time to spend the money, get some better prototype components. And these places can do dice also. They can do silkscreen dice. They can they can do things like tokens and all that stuff. It's pretty cool what they can do these days. Other prototyping resources. Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia. So I bet 75% of you have used one of these, and they're great. Especially they've been great during COVID because they have allowed us to still connect and play test. Even with this not being able to be in a room with someone. And I've used these extensively. I have a video here of a game I'm working on called The Maze. It's in Tabletop Simulator, and I've customized the table and I've customized the room, and I've really tried to thematically make it feel more cohesive. And you can do that. And for you artists out there, yes, you have that power. And the last note there, easy recording. So you can use OBS, Open Broadcast System, or another screen recording system to record your gameplay session. I record every session that I play so I can go back and listen to it and for the reasons I mentioned before. All right, so this is just playing a little bit of that video. So I run these through Discord.
Okay, cool.
So we'll organize through Discord. We'll use Discord voice, and then we'll connect over in Tabletop Simulator. So this is relating to playtesting communities. Where are you going to get your playtesters from? So lots of places you can get playtesters from. So Discord is a great place to get playtesters. There are several playtesting Discords, and that's all they do. They are Discords for playtesting. There are probably 5 or 6, 3 or 4 pretty big ones. I tend to just use one called Break My Game. I love the people over there. They're really friendly, and it's not just play testing. People post design questions and resources. So there's a lot of value added just to join a free community. Go Discord. Local playtest groups. Well, when we're not under a pandemic, you can go out and actually meet with people and find a local playtesting group. I've been a part of 3 different playtesting groups as I've moved across the galaxy. And I've always found a local playtesting group, and those are great. You playtest people's games, they playtest yours. You get to meet some cool folks. Sure, friends and family can playtest your games, but at some point you need more people than your brother or sister, aunts and uncles. You got to extend out past that. Here are some Facebook groups that you can look up and consider joining. Now, these aren't playtesting communities, so I have this kind of in the wrong place, but these are places where you can talk to other designers. There's a group for designers and there's a group for artists, and they're great resources to bounce ideas off of. And consider joining my Discord for Ogre Crossing Games. Here's the Discord that invites open for the first 10 people and the next 7 days. So if you want to come in and play test some of my awesome games, I'd love you have you over there. We have a fun time. And I don't spam too often, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I do. I don't think I do. All right. Woo! We are 2/3 of the presentation. I've got practically no time left. Designing rules. These are the questions you have to ask yourself. What's the core loop or activity that's going on in the game? How do I win the game? Is this game fun? Like, you all can read. So these are some of the questions that I ask myself. And I think they are fairly self-evident questions in that you know what the question is trying to get at, and you'll be able to answer the question when you reflect upon your game. Probably the one that we'll talk more about is player choices. We'll talk about that in just a second. And your audience. Who's playing your game? What age group? What demographic? What kind of games do they also tend to play? Like, you need to understand who you're making this game for. You're making it for young kids. You're making it for for adults only. So you have to know those things and answer those things about your rules. Moments and interactions we'll talk to more in just a bit as we talk about design philosophy. So your philosophy is your system of thinking and the truths that you hold, in this case, about game design. There are some axioms that you think are true about this topic or that topic. In this case, game design. There's some things that you believe need to happen in a good game. You can go back to my list. Is it fun? You know, those kinds of things. What makes the game fun? So as a designer, start to think about what your philosophy is, because it's going to inform your methodology, how you go about making your game. And it's a young designer, maybe, I don't know what my philosophy is. Well, okay, your philosophy basically is going to revolve around, or you can take two different design approaches. One is theme first and one is mechanisms first. Let's talk about themes first in the context of what I call being an experiential designer. So an experiential designer is thinking about the theme first. They're thinking about the moments and the immersion of the game. And I'll fast forward to some of the kind of inspiration for Alien Pet Shop. I originally was thinking about making a game that was a lot like a game called Gloom. And Gloom is a card game where everyone's trying to take that other player's to kill off their entire family, right? And I was like, oh, it would be cool if we had like that in space, right? And you can play like these plagues on other players and on their space stations, and that would be kind of like Gloom in space. And then they published Gloom in Space. I was like, well, dang it. My game idea has been taken. But I still had like the seeds in there. And so one of those seeds was just the trouble that aliens, cause in sci-fi. And so part of the inspiration for Pet Shop was just it's a kind of a love letter to these quirky creatures in sci-fi. So obviously we have the Tribbles in the original Star Trek, and they just spawned out of control. I'm like, well, that would be awesome if we had a pet shop, then you had those kinds of creatures in your shop. So that was a moment. That was an experience. It was one little just vignette, an idea that I thought, I want to relate that feeling in the game somehow. And so I then tried to align mechanisms or cards or art that would communicate that idea. In this case, if you roll the dice and you get a hazard on the die, it's going to spawn tokens of these little pink little critters. And so they're kind of spawning out of control. So it's a mechanism aligned to an idea that was inspiring for me. It was a moment I wanted to reproduce. And that's what I mean by experiential design. You're thinking about what you want the player to feel, what you want the experience to be like. Another inspiration here is Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, because Audrey 2 is an alien. If you don't know or remember, he's a big bad MFer from outer space. And he's mad, right? So he was an alien. And again, like, there is just so many cool aliens in sci-fi. And I really wanted to capture the idea of what that chaos would be like in the safer setting of a pet shop. And so that became that card, Death Find, very clearly referencing that particular idea. And in this case, if you roll that hazard, and if you put a worker on Death Find to take care of Death Find, he's going to eat that worker, and that worker is trash. It's gone for the game. So inspiration, moments you want to capture. So when you're designing your game, think about those moments that you want the player to have, design mechanisms that capture those. All right, I have like 6 slides left. We'll get it here. 1 minute per slide. Rule books. Draft your rule book early and revise it often. And this is not just a communication tool, which I think is extremely important. Your rule book forces you to think about all the rules. You can no longer kind of avoid describing or thinking about, as a designer, one of the rules. So by writing the rule book, you have to make solid that which is not. Write it into words. And it will make your game better. A professional rule book is done in InDesign from Adobe. It can be daunting to go about making a rule book. I'm just going to suggest pattern match good rule books. Find the same genre and weight of game that you're making. Look at their layout. Look at the ordering and sequencing of teaching, how they use graphics and headers, and just brutally copy that layout, because you can't copyright layout. So use that as your footprint for how you're going to design it. And as you get a better sense of how you need to communicate stuff, you can change the layout from there. But until then, just find a best practice and similar version and use that. One thing that I like to say is to transcribe a verbal explanation of the rules. So if you were sitting down and teaching someone and telling them how to play, you should record that, transcribe it, and those words can inform the phrases in your rule book. Just a strategy to use there. You're going to rewrite those rules probably about 10 times, major rewrites. I've rewritten the rule book for Pet Shop, not really from front to back, but huge revisions about 10 times. And it takes a lot of development time. It really does. And remember, a professionally printed rule book is going to be either 1 page front and back, or it's going to be multiples of 4 as they print front and back and fold over. So 4, 8, 12, 16 pages. Don't make an 11-page rule book. That would be dumb. You got to pull it back to 8 or stretch it out to 12. All right, design issues. Let's be speed through here. I'm just going to hit some highlights. Man, this is a whole talk. Design issues is a whole talk. But you can look through these, and I'll hit some of the ones that are my favorites. Kill your darlings is one of my favorites, because what this means is you're going to have a design idea that you really like, some inspiration or some a mechanism that you like. And at some point, you're going to start to wonder if it's the wrong fit for the game. And that's when you need to be willing to get rid of it. That's what we call killing your darlings. Even the most precious idea, you have to be willing to analyze it through that lens of, this is making the game fun? Is this the experience I want? Or is it adding too much cognitive load? Every aspect of your game can be looked at through the lens of how difficult is it for the player to wrap their head around this rule set? What is this doing to my decision space? All these different issues you can kind of think about. And at some point, you might have to just decide to kill one of your aspects of your game. And when in doubt, it's probably right to cut, because games tend to creep and get more complex as you solve design problems. They don't tend to get simpler. They always tend to get more complex. Scope creep, right? When in doubt, cut. And what I try to do is whenever I add something, I have to cut something. And it's brutal, folks. It really, really is. Or I have to simplify something. So if one concept gets more complex or has some depth, I had to think about, is there something I can do to soften and simplify something else? And watch out for dominant strategies. A dominant strategy is when there's a pattern of play that's kind of seen as the best way of playing to the detriment of other forms of play. Once someone discovers the dominant strategy, then the game kind of becomes known and solvable or solved for them, and then their chance of wanting to play is going to drastically go down. So you want to be careful about that dominant strategy. And you'll see it when you play tests. If people are doing the same thing, It's also kind of a balance issue. If something is out of balance, it becomes dominant. All right, publishing. Self-publish or not? So it's a big question. So you've designed your game, you're ready to share it with the world. It's really this simple question. It's line number 2. Do you have the time and will to self-publish? Because it is a ton of work. You can do a print and play release also if you want to, where you just upload your files and people can then download it and everyone can play your game for free. Some services will let you get a small royalty. But once you get that PDF out there, it's out there so people can print it and get your game for free. So why would they pay you? Here is just a quick blow through of the crowdfunding / Kickstarter self-publishing route. You have to develop your game 100% complete. When you pitch your game to a publisher and give the rights to the game to that publisher, they are going to do a lot of this stuff for you. They're going to manufacture for you. They're going to do the marketing for you. So all these things you'll have to do yourself if you crowdfund. You can see them all there. Make the Kickstarter campaign, make videos and all this stuff. It takes a ton of time. They kind of say it's like a full-time job. And if I weren't on sabbatical right now, I wouldn't be publishing Pet Shop anytime soon. It takes that much time to do this. So ask yourself that. Do I have the time to do this? And there's still folks who have full-time jobs who manage to self-publish, but they give themselves a really long timetable, or they've done it before. Once you've done it a couple of times, you start to get the sense of the questions that you need to ask, the information that you need to have, the steps, and all that. Wow, okay, I stumbled into the end of the presentation here. So yes, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of research. And if you feel that you can't do it all, then sure, form a small team. Some friends, some like-minded folks who have a similar design philosophy, but different skills. We have those 3 roles. So if you can find someone or some other folks who love the idea of making a board game, and you can divide that load up. So it's not one person doing all the art and everything. Everything that I showed you in Pet Shop, I did myself. All the art, all the graphic design, all the design work, everything. It's me. It's a ton and ton of work. But again, it's rewarding, and you have a lot of creative control over that. So ultimately, you just have to get started. If this is of interest to you, get started. Here are these links that you can begin your research process into board game mechanisms, places where you can get your prototypes made, books to read, blogs to start listening to. So that is there. Thank you. There's my email address, but I'll keep this up for just another moment or so.
Greg,
and
can you see the chat?
I can get to see the chat, yes. So I'm probably gonna go ahead and
Okay, so we're gonna, since it ran up against time, I'm gonna read them off really quick. You answer them as fast as you can, and we'll do a lightning round of questions, and then we'll try to get it down. So quick,
Okay.
What's the hardest part of the game design process? Boom.
publishing it.
Okay, good answer. A lot of stuff to go there. Did you consider going to a publisher for Alien Pet Shop? Why did you decide to self-publish?
No, and
No.
control. Well,
Control
and
of it,
profit.
okay?
If you pitch to a publisher, they're going to give you 5% royalties. No, I want all the royalties. I'm doing this much work. I want the money.
Right, gotcha. Control of money, gotcha. Looks like Arda asked a question, but somebody else answered that in the chat. Why would it be an 8 or 12-page rule book, but not 10? It's because they print in sets of 4, so that's good. Already answered. Somebody was paying attention. Any other final questions in chat quickly? We're running up against the clock. We thank everybody for coming out. It was obviously a very engrossing and very fun topic. Thank you, Greg.
Yep.
People are welcome to clap in chat as well, and thank him for showing up. And obviously, he did list his Discord, etc. So one final question real quick. If they aren't a game design student, where do you recommend beginning?
Well, can you become a game design student? I mean, I guess that's a fair question to ask. But I mean, if you're like past that phase in your life and you're no longer, seeking your undergraduate degree, I will take a look at those resources that I gave about game design and components and just start there. And
yeah, kind of like you said earlier, right? Like, just start playing games, start learning, analyzing it yourself and see what other people do when they analyze it so that you can start to see what other people are doing. It's like you do with any topic, right? You start at find a starting spot as tutorial, like a talk like this, like with Greg.
There you go. Yep, research. I'm going to paste the link to my Discord into there.
Okay.
People want
when I tried it earlier, it said it wasn't valid, but that might have been just for me. Oh, no, it's working now. So good. Maybe I typed it wrong. Oh yeah, probably the S was off. All right,
yeah,
so
it's all uppercase except for that S.
I know, and it has to be exactly that. So, okay, so it looks like we hit all the questions. It looks like we hit all the time. Again, thank you so much, Greg. Our next talk is, I had that up in front of me and now I forgot it. It's like April 14th, I want to say, but before I commit to that, I'm going to look it up while I'm doing it. But again, thanks for everybody for showing up. It's Body Ownership and Virtual Reality. It is April 14th, same time, 12 to 1 o'clock. Stephanie Kane is going to be presenting. It will be a great talk. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day. Cool. Bye.
Go make cool stuff. Happy designing.
Yeah, get Tabletop Simulator. It's always a good thing to have, to play people's games and try other things out there.